The emergency session of the Galactic Defense Coalition had been going on for 6 hours. Admiral Thexka of the Kalari paced back and forth on his powerful legs, his golden fur bristling with frustration. Across the chamber, General Vex of the Zephyrian stood perfectly still, his chrome-like skin reflecting the harsh lights of the command center. Between them, Sage Quileth of the Mindari floated in her meditation sphere, her large eyes closed as she tried to sense solutions through the chaos of panicked thoughts filling the room. 17 star systems, Admiral Thexka growled, his voice carrying the weight of a warrior who had never known defeat until now. 17 systems consumed in 6 months. The Vorthak swarm moves faster than anything we have ever faced. General Vex's optical sensors whirred as he processed the latest battle reports. Our technology cannot match their adaptation speed. Every weapon we deploy, they counter within hours. Every strategy we implement, they absorb and turn against us. Sage Quileth opened her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice carried the sadness of a mind reader who had felt the final thoughts of billions. The Vorthak are not just conquering. They are learning. Each world they consume adds to their collective knowledge. We are not just losing battles. We are teaching them how to destroy us. The room fell silent except for the quiet humming of the life support systems. The 3 greatest military minds in the known galaxy had just admitted something that none of their species had ever faced before. They were losing a war they could not win. That was when the human delegation arrived. General Sarah Chen walked into the chamber with 5 other humans trailing behind her. She wore a simple green uniform with no decorations except small metal bars on her collar. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical style, and her boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. The aliens noticed that none of the humans carried weapons that they could see. Admiral Thexka looked down at the small human female. In his warrior culture, leaders proved themselves through size and strength. This human looked like she could barely reach his chest, and her muscles seemed weak compared to any Kalari warrior. "You are the human military commander?" he asked, trying to keep the doubt out of his voice. "I am," General Chen replied in a calm tone. "We received your message about the Vorthak threat. Earth has decided to offer assistance." General Vex tilted his metallic head. His scanners showed that human technology was at least 200 years behind Zephyrian standards. "What assistance can your species provide? Your ships are primitive. Your weapons are chemical-based. Your computers are barely capable of faster-than-light calculations." General Chen smiled in a way that made Sage Quileth feel something strange through her empathic abilities. It was not anger or insult. It was something else. Something patient. "We would like to help however we can," General Chen said. "Perhaps you could assign us a smaller role while your main forces handle the primary threat." The alien commanders looked at each other. They had called for help from every species in the galaxy. Most had refused to get involved with the Vorthak. The few who offered help wanted to send supplies or technical advisors. Only the humans had offered to actually fight. Admiral Thexka made a decision. "Very well. The agricultural world Kepler 442b is in the Vorthak's projected path. It has 3 billion Terlaxian farmers and produces food for 12 systems. We were planning to evacuate it, but if your forces could defend it while we mount our main attack elsewhere." "That sounds perfect," General Chen said. "How many troops can we bring?" "How many do you have available?" Sage Quileth asked. "For this operation?" "About 50,000. The aliens tried not to show their reaction. 50,000 soldiers to defend an entire planet against a force that had consumed 17 star systems. It was either very brave or very stupid. "When can your forces arrive?" General Vex asked. "They're already here," General Chen said. "We brought them with us." Admiral Thexka's eyes widened. "You brought 50,000 soldiers in one ship?" "Actually, we brought them in 12 ships. The other 11 are in your outer system, waiting for permission to approach." The aliens quickly checked their sensors. Sure enough, 11 human vessels were holding position at the edge of the system. The ships looked old and worn, with none of the elegant curves of Zephyrian design or the aggressive angles of Kalari warships. They looked like tools that had been used many times. Over the next 3 days, the aliens watched the humans deploy to Kepler 442b. What they saw confused them. The human soldiers did not march in perfect formations like Zephyrian troops. They did not challenge each other to combat trials like Kalari warriors. They did not meditate and seek harmony like Mindari peacekeepers. Instead, they did things that seemed almost boring. They spent hours checking their equipment, They dug holes in the ground and filled them with supplies. They set up communication devices and tested them over and over. They studied maps and argued about the best places to put their weapons. They even spent time cooking food and cleaning their uniforms. They do not seem very warlike. Admiral Thexka observed as he watched human soldiers playing some kind of game with cards during their rest period. Their weapons are so simple, General Vex added. Chemical explosives, metal projectiles, primitive vehicles. How do they expect to fight bioships with such tools? Sage Quileth was the most disturbed by what she sensed from the human minds. Their thoughts are organized, too organized. When I read Kalari minds, I sense honor and courage and the desire for glory. When I read Zephyrian minds, I sense logic and calculation and the pursuit of efficiency. But when I read human mind, what do you sense? Admiral Thexka asked. Purpose, Sage Quileth said slowly. Cold-focused purpose. And something else. Something that feels like experience. None of the aliens understood what she meant. The human commander, General Chen, requested meetings with the local Turlaxian leaders to discuss evacuation plans. She asked detailed questions about the planet's population centers, transportation networks, and food storage facilities. She wanted to know about weather patterns and geological surveys. She even asked about local wildlife and plant life. Why do you need to know about the animals? A Turlaxian official asked. Everything matters in a combat zone, General Chen replied. We need to understand the environment we're defending. When the aliens asked about human battle plans, General Chen showed them maps covered with symbols and numbers. The plans looked nothing like the elegant strategies used by other species. Instead of focusing on honor or technological superiority, the human plan seemed to assume that everything would go wrong and prepared for dozens of different possibilities. What if your primary communication network fails? Admiral Thexka asked, pointing to one part of the plan. We switched to secondary communications, General Chen said, pointing to another set of symbols. What if that fails too? We have tertiary systems, and if those fail, we have backup procedures that don't require any technology at all. General Vex studied the human defensive positions. Your placement seems random. There is no logical pattern to your troop deployment. There's a pattern, General Chen said. It's just not the kind that shows up on a computer analysis. We're not trying to create a perfect defense. We're trying to create a defense that can adapt when the perfect plan fails. The aliens left these meetings feeling more confused than before. The humans seemed to plan for failure instead of success. They prepared for chaos instead of order. They treated war like it was some kind of job instead of a test of honor or a demonstration of superiority. None of them realized that this was exactly the point. The Vorthak were coming, and soon the galaxy would learn what it meant to face an enemy that had turned warfare into a profession. The Vorthak scouts arrived 3 days later, just as the humans had predicted they would. The aliens had not expected such accuracy in the timing, but General Chen had simply shrugged when asked about it. They follow patterns, she had said. Every enemy follows patterns even when they think they don't. The scout force consisted of 12 bioships, each one the size of a city block and covered in organic sensors that pulsed with sickly green light. They moved through space like living things, which they were, and their approach set off alarms throughout the coalition fleet. Admiral Thexka prepared his warriors for glorious combat. His ship's weapons charged with brilliant energy, ready to meet the enemy in honorable battle. General Vex calculated firing solutions and defensive patterns, his ship's computers working at maximum efficiency to find the perfect tactical response. The humans did nothing visible at all. Why are your ships not moving to intercept? Admiral Thexka asked over the communication channel. The enemy scouts must be met with strength. We're tracking them, General Chen replied from her position on the planet's surface. Let them come closer, closer. General Vex's synthesized voice carried surprise. They are already within optimal firing range. We should destroy them before they can report our defensive positions back to the main swarm. They're going to report back anyway, General Chen said calmly. Whether we kill these scouts or not, the main force knows we're here. What matters is what they think they know about us. The Vorthak scouts spread out and began scanning the planet with their biosensors. The energy beams swept across the surface like searchlights, gathering information about defensive positions, troop strengths, and weapon placements. The alien commanders watched their sensor displays as the enemy gathered intelligence about their forces. But something strange happened when the biosensors tried to scan the human positions. Instead of getting clear readings, the scouts seemed to receive confusing and contradictory information. Sometimes the sensors showed large concentrations of troops, where satellite imagery revealed empty fields. Other times they detected powerful weapon signatures from locations that appeared to contain nothing but supply tents. "How are you hiding your forces from their scans?" Sage Quaylith asked. Her empathic abilities let her sense the growing confusion in the Vorthak hive mind. "We're not hiding anything," General Chen replied. "We're just showing them what we want them to see." The human explanation came from Colonel Martinez, Chen's second in command. His weathered face showed the kind of scars that came from real combat experience. Electronic warfare isn't about having better technology. It's about understanding how the enemy thinks and giving them information that leads them to make bad decisions. Over the next 2 hours, the aliens watched the humans conduct what they called active deception operations. Using simple tricks and old technology, the human forces made themselves appear larger in some areas and smaller in others. They created false weapon signatures and phantom troop movements. They even played recordings of vehicle noises in empty areas to confuse the enemy's audio sensors. "This is not honorable," Admiral Thexka said, though he sounded more curious than angry. "Warriors should face each other with truth and courage." "Honor doesn't stop bullets," replied Sergeant Williams, a human soldier who was setting up what looked like a fake artillery position. "And courage doesn't bring dead soldiers back to life." When the Vorthak scouts finally left to report back to their main force, they carried with them a completely wrong picture of the human defenses. They believed the humans had twice as many soldiers as they actually did, positioned in locations that made no tactical sense, armed with weapons that didn't match any known human technology. "Why did you want them to think you have more troops than you actually do?" General Vex asked. "Surely making the enemy believe you are stronger will cause them to send more forces against you." General Chen looked at the Zephyrian commander with something that might have been pity. "Who said we wanted them to think we're stronger?" The answer came 18 hours later when the main Vorthak swarm arrived at Kepler 442b. The force that emerged from hyperspace was massive beyond anything the Coalition had previously encountered. Bioships the size of asteroids drifted through space like a living storm cloud, their organic hulls pulsing with internal light. Smaller fighter organisms swarmed around them in numbers that blocked out the stars. But the swarm's deployment revealed something interesting. Based on the false information from their scouts, the Vorthak had prepared for the wrong kind of battle. They had brought massive siege organisms to attack the fake strong positions that didn't exist. They had positioned their forces to counter phantom weapons that were never there. They had even deployed specialized bioforms to fight the extra troops that the humans never had. "They're fighting the wrong enemy," Colonel Martinez observed as he watched the enemy formation through his binoculars. "They prepared for the battle their scouts told them they would face, not the battle we're actually going to give them." Admiral Thexka was beginning to understand. "You made them waste their preparation time." "More than that," General Chen said as she studied her tablet computer. "We made them bring the wrong tools for the job. Look at their formation. Those big siege ships can't maneuver quickly. Those specialized fighter organisms are designed for one specific type of combat. When they realize their intelligence was wrong, they'll have to reorganize their entire force. And reorganization takes time," Sage Quaylith added, her eyes widening as she understood the human strategy. "Time we'll use to hurt them," General Chen confirmed. The first phase of the battle began not with glorious charges or massive weapon exchanges, but with small human teams doing things the aliens didn't understand. Human soldiers moved through the wilderness carrying equipment that looked more like farming tools than weapons. They spent hours in positions where no enemy could see them, then left without firing a shot. "What are your troops doing out there?" Admiral Thexka asked after watching several of these mysterious missions. "Preparation," was all General Chen would say. The Vorthak began their assault with a probe attack, sending several thousand of their smaller bioforms down to the planet's surface to test the defenses. These creatures were the size of ground vehicles, with natural armor and biological weapons that could punch through most known materials. They moved in perfect coordination, guided by the hive mind that connected all Vorthak organisms. The Coalition forces prepared to meet this probe with standard tactics. Kalari warriors readied their honor blades and energy shields for close combat. Zephyrian automated defense systems locked onto targets and calculated optimal firing solutions. Mindari peacekeepers prepared to coordinate the defense through their telepathic links. The humans disappeared. One moment they were visible on sensors and communication channels. The next moment they seemed to vanish from the battlefield entirely. Their equipment signatures went dark. Their radio chatter stopped. Even their heat signatures became hard to detect. Where did they go? Admiral Thexka demanded as his sensors showed empty areas where human forces had been positioned just minutes before. The answer came when the Vorthak probe force reached what should have been the first human defensive line. Instead of meeting organized resistance, the bioforms found empty trenches and abandoned equipment. They moved forward cautiously, their hive mind processing this unexpected development. That was when the humans showed the galaxy their first lesson in professional warfare. The attack came from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Human soldiers appeared from hiding places that shouldn't have been able to conceal them. Weapons fired from positions that sensors said were empty. Explosives detonated under enemy feet in areas that had been cleared just hours before. But what shocked the alien observers most was not the effectiveness of the human ambush. It was the way the humans fought. Kalari warriors fought with honor and courage, facing their enemies directly and seeking glorious victory or noble death. Zephyrian soldiers fought with logic and precision, following calculated strategies and predetermined responses. Mindari peacekeepers fought with harmony and coordination, moving as one mind in multiple bodies. The humans fought like it was their job. They showed no anger toward their enemies and no joy in combat. They simply killed Vorthak bioforms with the same professional efficiency that a factory worker might show while assembling machinery. When their ammunition ran low, they switched to backup weapons without hesitation. When their positions were overrun, they retreated to secondary positions that had already been prepared. When their comrades were wounded, they provided medical aid while continuing to fire at enemies with their free hands. They fight like machines, General Vex observed, his sensors trying to understand the human combat patterns. No, Sage Quileth said quietly, her empathic abilities picking up something the others missed. Machines follow programs. These humans are thinking and adapting constantly, but they do it without emotion. They've learned to think clearly while people are trying to kill them. The first probe attack lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Vorthak had lost 70% of their attacking force while the humans had suffered only light casualties. But more importantly, the bioforms had failed to gather the intelligence they needed about human defense. The main Vorthak assault began at dawn on the 4th day, just as the human meteorologist had predicted it would. The prediction had surprised the alien observers, who didn't understand how weather could influence the timing of a space-based attack. They'll want the thermal updrafts from the morning sun to help their atmospheric entry, the meteorologist had explained. Saves them energy. And energy conservation is basic survival behavior for any biological system. The explanation revealed something that the aliens were only beginning to understand about humans. They studied their enemies not as evil forces to be destroyed, but as problems to be solved. The attack came in waves that darkened the sky. Millions of Vorthak bioforms descended from orbit like a living rain, their organic hulls glowing with the heat of atmospheric entry. The largest were the size of buildings, equipped with natural weapons that could level city blocks. The smallest were no bigger than insects, but they carried toxins that could kill a full-grown Kalari warrior in minutes. Admiral Thexka watched the descent through his ship's sensors and felt his warrior's heart fill with battle fury. This was the kind of fight that songs were written about, the kind of glorious last stand that would be remembered for generations. His golden fur bristled with excitement as he prepared to lead his warriors into combat. General Vex calculated the odds with mechanical precision. The enemy force outnumbered the defenders by roughly 4,000 to 1. Even with perfect tactical execution and 0 casualties among coalition forces, victory was mathematically impossible. His logical mind began planning for an organized retreat. Sage Quileth felt the approach of the Vorthak through her empathic abilities, and what she sensed made her meditation sphere tremble. The hive mind was vast and hungry, filled with the absorbed knowledge of 17 consumed civilizations. It knew how Kalari fought, how Zephyrians thought, how Mindari coordinated. It was prepared for every strategy the coalition had ever used. But as the alien commanders prepared for either glorious death or logical retreat, They noticed that the humans were doing something completely different. They were working. All across the planetary surface, human soldiers moved with calm efficiency to positions they had prepared weeks in advance. They checked equipment with practiced motions, communicated in short, clear sentences, and settled into their assigned roles like pieces of a vast machine clicking into place. Shouldn't they be afraid? Admiral Thekska asked as he watched human soldiers calmly eating breakfast, while millions of hostile aliens descended toward them. Don't they understand the odds they face? They understand, General Chen replied over the communication channel. Her voice carried the same calm tone she had used when discussing supply logistics. But fear is just another factor to manage, like ammunition or fuel or weather. You account for it in your planning, and then you do your job anyway. The first wave of Vorthak bioforms reached the outer defensive perimeter and met something they had never encountered before. Humans who fought like they had done this 1,000 times. The human response was not heroic in the way the galaxy understood heroism. There were no dramatic speeches or desperate charges. Instead, there was something far more terrifying. Professional competence applied to the business of killing. Human artillery began firing before the enemy came into visual range. Their shells programmed to explode at precisely calculated intervals to create overlapping zones of destruction. The guns fired continuously for 3 hours without pause, their crews switching positions between pre-prepared firing points as the enemy tried to locate and destroy them. How do they keep their artillery operational under such intense counterfire? General Vex asked as he watched human gun crews continue firing, even while Vorthak bioweapons destroyed their positions around them. Multiple redundant positions and mobility. Colonel Martinez explained as he coordinated the artillery response. We dig in, we shoot, we move, we dig in somewhere else, we shoot some more. The enemy can kill our guns, but they can't kill all of them fast enough to stop the barrage. When the Vorthak bioforms broke through the artillery screen and reached the human ground positions, they encountered defensive systems that seemed to operate by completely different rules from normal warfare. Human. Soldiers didn't hold fixed positions like Kalari warriors or maintain perfect formations like Zephyrian troops. Instead, they flowed across the battlefield like water, appearing where they were needed and vanishing when positions became untenable. They fought from trenches, buildings, vehicles, and improvised cover that they created, on the spot using explosives and engineering equipment. But what disturbed the alien observers most was the way human soldiers treated casualties. When a Kalari warrior was wounded in battle, his brothers would either carry him to safety or die defending his position, because honor demanded it. When a Zephyrian unit took losses, the survivors would recalculate their tactical position and adjust their formation accordingly. Because logic required it, when humans took casualties, they kept fighting. Sage Quillith watched in horror and fascination as a human medic treated wounded soldiers in the middle of active combat, administering first aid with one hand while firing a rifle with the other. The medic's mind showed no panic, no overwhelm, just focused concentration on two simultaneous tasks that each required complete attention. How is this possible? She asked General Chen. How can your soldier divide their attention like this without losing effectiveness in both activities? Training, General Chen replied simply. We train until complex tasks become automatic. Then we train to do multiple automatic tasks at the same time. Then we train to think clearly while doing all of that under stress. The battle continued for 18 hours without pause. The Vorthak threw wave after wave of bioforms at the human positions, each attack designed to exploit what the hive mind believed were human weaknesses. They sent fast-moving scouts to overwhelm human reaction times. They sent heavily armored brutes to break human defensive lines. They sent intelligent hunter forms to outthink human tactics. Every attack failed, but not because the humans were stronger or faster or smarter than their enemies. The attacks failed because the humans had prepared for them to fail. Your defensive strategy makes no logical sense, General Vex observed as he tried to understand the human tactical doctrine. You allow the enemy to overrun your forward positions. Then you counterattack from directions they cannot predict. You sacrifice tactical advantages to maintain strategic flexibility. Your entire approach seems designed around the assumption that everything will go wrong. That's because everything always goes wrong, Sergeant Williams replied as he coordinated a squad of soldiers who were fighting their way out of an overrun position. No plan survives contact with the enemy, so we don't make plans. We make guidelines and then we adapt. The human approach to adaptation was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. When Vorthak bioforms developed resistance to human explosive weapons, human soldiers switched to incendiary rounds. When the bioforms adapted to fire, the humans used acid. When acid became ineffective, they switched to kinetic penetrators. They seemed to have an endless supply of different ways to kill things. How many different weapon types did your species develop? Admiral Thexka asked as he watched human soldiers field yet another tool of destruction he had never seen before. We've been killing each other for about 10,000 years. General Chen answered matter-of-factly. We got good at it. But the weapons were only part of what made the humans effective. What truly set them apart was their ability to coordinate complex operations while under extreme stress. Human units communicated constantly, sharing information about enemy movements, ammunition status, tactical opportunities, and casualty reports. But unlike the telepathic coordination of the Mindari, human communication was based on training and procedure rather than natural ability. How do your soldiers know what to do without constant orders from commanders? Sage Quillith asked as she watched a human squad reorganize itself after losing its leader, without any apparent confusion or delay. We train every soldier to understand the mission, Colonel Martinez explained. Not just their individual job, but the whole operation. So when something goes wrong, they can figure out what needs to be done and do it without waiting for orders. As night fell on the first day of the main battle, the Vorthak had lost nearly 1 million bioforms while advancing less than 10 kilometers across the planetary surface. The human casualties were significantly lower, but more importantly, the human defensive capacity seemed undiminished. The alien observers began to realize that they were witnessing something unprecedented. A military force that actually got more effective as the battle progressed. They're learning, Sage Quillith said with wonder in her voice. Not just adapting to what the enemy does, but learning how to fight this specific enemy more effectively with each engagement. Of course we're learning, General Chen said as she reviewed the day's battle reports with the same attention to detail that a SC. On the morning of the second day, the Vorthak deployed their ultimate weapon. The Biotitan that emerged from the largest hive ship was beyond anything the Coalition had prepared for. It was the size of a mountain, a living organism that had been grown specifically to consume entire planets. Its surface writhed with millions of smaller organisms that could break down matter at the molecular level and convert it into more Vorthak bioforms. It moved across the landscape like a slow-motion avalanche, leaving behind nothing but sterile rock and acid pools. Admiral Thexka stared at his sensors in disbelief. The Biotitan's energy signature was larger than some of his capital ships. Its biological armor was thick enough to shrug off anything in the Coalition arsenal. We have to evacuate, he said, his warrior's pride finally breaking under the weight of tactical reality. No force in the galaxy can fight something that large. General Vex ran calculations through his ship's computers and reached the same conclusion. The creature's mass alone will disrupt the planet's geological stability. Even if we could somehow destroy it, the debris would render the world uninhabitable. Sage Quillith could barely function as the Biotitan's alien thoughts pressed against her empathic shields. The thing's mind was vast and hungry, filled with the absorbed knowledge of countless consumed worlds. It knew exactly how to break every form of resistance it might encounter. But when the alien commanders called General Chen to discuss evacuation procedures, they found that the human response was not despair or retreat planning. It was a request for permission to implement something called Doctrine 7. What is Doctrine 7? Admiral Thexka asked. General Chen's face on the communication screen showed an expression that the aliens had never seen before. It was not anger or fear or determination. It was something colder than any of those emotions. Something that made Sage Quillith's empathic abilities recoil in instinctive terror. Total warfare protocols, General Chen said in a tone that carried no emotion at all. Complete commitment of all available resources to enemy destruction. No limitations on methodology. No restrictions on acceptable losses. What does that mean in practical terms? General Vex asked, though his sensors were already detecting changes in human troop movements that his computers couldn't analyze. It means we stop fighting like this is a police action and start fighting like this is what it actually is. Colonel Martinez replied as he coordinated movements across the entire planetary surface. An extinction event. The transformation of the human forces was visible within hours. The aliens watched in fascination and growing horror as 50,000 human soldiers became something else entirely. The casual professionalism that had characterized their earlier fighting disappeared, replaced by something that seemed to operate on a completely different level. Human soldiers began moving with mechanical precision toward predetermined positions. They abandoned defensive tactics entirely, instead flowing across the battlefield like a tide of destruction aimed directly at the Biotitan. They left behind wounded comrades, abandoned salvageable equipment, and ignored tactical opportunities that didn't contribute to the primary objective. They're not fighting to win territory anymore, Sage Quailith observed as she tried to understand the shift in human mental patterns. They're fighting to kill that specific creature, regardless of cost. The first indication of what Doctrine 7 meant came when human orbital assets that hadn't fired a single shot during the previous day's battle suddenly revealed themselves. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as communication satellites began bombarding Vorthak positions with precision that shouldn't have been possible with human technology. Ships that had been listed as transports launched guided missiles with warheads that registered on sensors as small nuclear devices. "You brought nuclear weapons into Coalition space without authorization," Admiral Thexka said, though his tone carried more awe than anger. "We brought tools," General Chen corrected. "Nuclear weapons, biological agents, chemical dispersants, gravity manipulation devices, and several things that don't have names in any language you speak. We hoped we wouldn't need them." The nuclear bombardment lasted for 3 hours, turning vast sections of the planetary surface into radioactive glass. But the Biotitan survived, its incredible size and biological adaptability, allowing it to absorb damage that would have destroyed entire fleets. That was when the humans revealed the second aspect of Doctrine 7. They began using themselves as weapons. Human soldiers with portable nuclear devices strapped to their backs walked directly into Vorthak formations and detonated themselves. Human pilots loaded their aircraft with experimental explosives and flew them directly into the Biotitan's sensory organs. Human engineers collapsed their own underground installations to create sinkholes that swallowed entire Vorthak divisions. "This is madness," Admiral Thexka breathed as he watched human soldiers voluntarily enter situations that guaranteed their deaths. "No species fights like this." "Yes, they do," Sage Quailith said quietly, her voice filled with something like reverence. "One species does. The species that turned warfare into a science. But what truly shocked the alien observers was not that humans were willing to die for their cause. Many species could fight to the death when necessary. What shocked them was that the humans were making their deaths count with mathematical precision. Every human who died took calculated numbers of enemies with them. Every sacrifice achieved specific tactical objectives that contributed to the overall strategic goal. The humans were spending their lives like currency, but they were getting full value for each expenditure. "How do they calculate the exchange rate?" General Vex asked as his computers tried to analyze the tactical mathematics behind human sacrifice tactics. "Experience," Colonel Martinez replied as he coordinated another suicide mission with the same calm efficiency he might use to order supplies. "We've been studying warfare for our entire species' history. We know exactly what it costs to achieve specific objectives." The assault on the Biotitan continued for 16 hours. Human forces attacked it from every direction simultaneously, using weapons and tactics that ranged from crude explosives to exotic technologies that the aliens didn't know existed. They targeted its sensory organs, its reproductive systems, its nutrient processing centers, and its communication links with surgical precision. But the creature was too large and too resilient. For every wound the humans inflicted, it could regenerate 2 more sections of healthy tissue. For every attack they mounted, it could spawn 10,000 smaller organisms to defend itself. That was when the humans implemented the third and final aspect of Doctrine 7. They stopped trying to kill the Biotitan and started trying to make it kill itself, using a combination of biological agents and psychological warfare techniques that had been developed during humanity's own violent history. Human forces began introducing toxins into the creature's system that didn't damage its tissues but disrupted its neural pathways. They used sonic weapons to interfere with its internal communication systems. They even employed captured Vorthak bioforms that had been reprogrammed using techniques that the aliens couldn't comprehend. "How did you learn to reprogram living creatures?" Sage Quileth asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. "We've been reprogramming ourselves for thousands of years," General Chen replied. "Training, conditioning, indoctrination, education. Once you understand how minds work, you can change them. And the Vorthak hive mind is just a very large, very complex mind." The Biotitan began to show signs of confusion and disorientation. Its movements became erratic. Its spawning patterns turned chaotic. The smaller organisms it produced began attacking each other instead of human forces. But even as the creature weakened, it continued to consume the planet's surface. Entire continents disappeared into its massive digestive systems. The world's atmosphere began to change as the creature's metabolic processes pumped alien gases into the air. "The planet is dying," Admiral Thexka observed. "Even if you destroy that thing, there won't be anything left to save." General Chen looked at him with eyes that seemed older than her years. "The planet was never the objective. The objective was to prove that the Vorthak can be killed. Everything else is acceptable losses." The final phase of the battle lasted 3 days. The Biotitan, driven insane by human biological warfare and neural manipulation, began consuming itself in a feeding frenzy that eventually caused its massive body to collapse under its own weight. The death throes of the creature created earthquakes that could be felt from orbit and released toxic clouds that poisoned the atmosphere for decades to come. When it was over, Kepler 442b was uninhabitable. The 3 billion Turlaxian farmers were dead. The agricultural systems that had fed 12-star systems were destroyed. The planet itself was a radioactive wasteland that would take centuries to recover. But the Vorthak Biotitan was dead, and more importantly, the methods used to kill it had been recorded and analyzed. The humans had created a template for defeating creatures that the galaxy had believed were invincible. "You saved the galaxy by destroying a world," Sage Quileth said as she tried to process what she had witnessed. "We did our job," General Chen replied. "That's what professional soldiers do. We solve problems. Sometimes the solution is expensive." As did the news of what happened at Kepler 442b spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, every species with faster-than-light communication had received detailed reports about the human victory over the Vorthak Biotitan, but the reports raised more questions than they answered. Admiral Thexka found himself standing before the Kalari High Council, trying to explain something that challenged every assumption his people held about warfare and honor. The golden-furred warriors who surrounded him had built their entire culture around the concept of glorious combat. But what he had witnessed on Kepler 442b was something else entirely. "You say they fought without honor?" asked High Counselor Dexra, his battle scars gleaming in the chamber's ceremonial light. "I say they fought without the need for honor," Admiral Thexka replied carefully. They had something more effective. The distinction was lost on most of the council, but Admiral Thexka continued his report anyway. He described human soldiers who faced certain death with the same calm professionalism that others might show while performing routine maintenance. He talked about commanders who made decisions that would kill thousands of their own troops as easily as they might choose what to eat for breakfast. They treated their own lives as resources to be spent, he said, but they spent them wisely, getting maximum value from every death. It was horrible and magnificent at the same time. Across the galaxy, General Vex was having a similar conversation with the Zephyrian Collective. His report to the machine minds that governed his species focused on the tactical and technological aspects of human warfare. But even his logical perspective couldn't fully explain what he had observed. Their technology was primitive by our standards, he reported to the assembled processing units. But their application of that technology was sophisticated beyond our models. They used simple tools to achieve complex objectives through methods we had not calculated were possible. The collective's primary processing unit requested clarification. Explain their efficiency ratios. General Vex consulted his internal memory banks. They achieved total enemy force destruction, while losing only 37% of their own combat strength. But those statistics do not adequately describe their performance. They were more effective with inferior resources than we have been with superior ones. Sage Quileth's report to the Mindari Council was perhaps the most disturbing of all. because her empathic abilities had allowed her to sense what the human soldiers were actually thinking during combat. The revelation challenged everything the peace-loving Mindari believed about the nature of consciousness and civilization. They were not cruel, she told the assembled telepaths as they floated in their meditation chambers. Cruelty implies emotion, and these humans felt very little emotion during battle. They were simply professional. They approached the destruction of their enemies with the same detached competence that we might use to solve a mathematical equation. The council's eldest member, a being who had lived for over 1,000 years, asked the question that was troubling them all. How does a species develop such capabilities without losing their essential nature? I believe, Sage Quileth said slowly, that this is their essential nature. They are not peaceful beings who learn to fight. They are fighting beings who learn to be peaceful, and they can return to their original nature whenever circumstances require it. But the most significant conversation was taking place in the highest levels of Coalition Command, where the 3 alien leaders were trying to understand the implications of what they had witnessed. "We have a problem," Admiral Thexka said, as the 3 commanders met in secure communication. "The humans didn't just defeat the Vorthak. They made it look easy. The tactical applications are obvious," General Vex agreed. "Every military force in the galaxy will want to study human methods. Some will want to hire human soldiers. Others will want to eliminate the human threat before it grows larger." Sage Quileth's image flickered as she processed the emotional implications of the situation. "There's something else. The humans are already receiving requests for assistance from dozens of worlds. They're being offered contracts to solve military problems across the galaxy." The 3 leaders sat in silence as they considered what this meant. Humanity had just demonstrated that they possessed the most effective military force in known space. But more than that, they had revealed that warfare was not just something they were good at. It was something they had turned into a business. General Chen was having her own meetings back on Earth, but her conversations were with human military leaders who understood exactly what had happened at Kepler 442b and what it meant for humanity's future in galactic politics. "The contracts are already coming in," reported Admiral Patterson, head of the Earth Defense Force's Strategic Planning Division. 17 different species want to hire human forces for various conflicts. The Zephyrians are offering to trade advanced technology for military consultation. Even some of the Kalari clans are asking about training programs. General Chen studied the reports on her tablet with the same analytical approach she had used to plan the defense of Kepler 442b. "What about threats?" 3 species have made diplomatic inquiries about our military capabilities that sound more like intelligence gathering than genuine interest in cooperation, Admiral Patterson admitted. "The hegemony is definitely concerned about the implications of human military effectiveness." "They should be," General Chen said matter-of-factly. "We just demonstrated that any military problem in this galaxy can be solved if you're willing to pay the right price." But the most important meeting was taking place in a secure facility buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps, where the leaders of Earth's various nations were trying to decide how humanity should respond to its new role in galactic affairs. "We have become the galaxy's mercenaries," said President Zhang of the Asian Federation, her tone carrying both pride and concern. "Every conflict in known space is now potentially our business. That's not necessarily a bad thing," replied Chancellor Muller of the European Union. "Military service has always been one of humanity's most exportable skills. Now we have a market that spans the galaxy." The debate that followed would reshape human civilization as much as first contact with alien species had. Some argued that humanity should embrace its role as the galaxy's professional military force, building an economy based on the export of military services. Others worried about the long-term consequences of becoming known throughout the galaxy as a warrior species. But the decision had already been made by the simple act of demonstrating what human soldiers could accomplish when properly motivated and equipped. The galaxy now knew that humanity possessed something that no other species had: the ability to treat warfare as a profession rather than a test of honor, technological superiority, or spiritual harmony. The first official contract arrived 3 weeks after the Battle of Kepler 442b. The Rigelian Trade Consortium was facing piracy problems along their shipping routes and requested human assistance in eliminating the threat. The contract offered payment in rare metals, advanced technology, and territorial concessions that would give humanity its first permanent foothold in another star system. General, Chen read through the contract terms with the same attention to detail she had given to battle plans. The tactical requirements were straightforward. Eliminate pirate forces that were operating from hidden bases in an asteroid field. The strategic implications were more complex. Success would establish humanity as the galaxy's premier provider of military solutions. It's a small contract, she told the assembled human leadership. Only about 2,000 pirates operating maybe 50 ships. We could handle it with a single regiment. But it's also a test, President Chen noted. The galaxy is watching to see if what happened at Kepler 442b was a fluke, or if we can deliver consistent results, General. Chen smiled with the confidence of someone who had spent her entire life preparing for exactly this moment. It wasn't a fluke. We've been practicing for this job for 10,000 years. We're very good at it. The contract was signed 6 hours later. Within a year, human military forces were operating in 12 different star systems, solving problems that other species couldn't handle. Human soldiers became as common in galactic conflict zones as human merchants had become in galactic trade networks. Earth established military academies that trained officers from dozens of alien species in human tactical doctrine. The galaxy learned to live with the knowledge that somewhere in human space, there were always soldiers preparing for the next war, strategists planning for conflicts that might never happen, and engineers developing weapons that they hoped would never be used. But most importantly, the galaxy learned that when problems arose that required military solutions, there was always someone willing to solve them for the right price. The humans had found their place in galactic civilization not as explorers or diplomats or merchants, but as professional soldiers in a galaxy that would always need people who were very, very good at warfare. And as General Chen often reminded people who questioned the morality of turning war into a business, someone had